On Wednesday, the government announced an oversubscription of the Kenya Pipeline Company shares following the much publicized IPO. But as they say, the devil is in the details. First, the privatization of the Kenyan pipeline has been a topic that dominated public discourse for the better part of the year 2025. Many questions were posed, many loaded in suspicion that particular government functionaries were intent at cutting a piece of the KPC cake. But then the government took the sale through the required process, getting Parliament's nod in October 2025. By December, a transaction advisor had been found and the sale commenced on the 19th of January. For over a month, there were public messages put out. Private messages too were sent out to CDSC account holders, commercial banks to their customers, all in a bid to have Kenyans own a piece of the Kenya pipeline. And when time was running out, a 3-day extension was secured. Let's look at the outcome. Out of an allocation of 20%, equivalent to 2.3 billion shares reserved for Kenyan individuals, only 464 million shares bids were received. This translates to 3.9% of total shares on offer. 70,000 Kenyans, we are told, are reported to have sent in their bids, an average of 6,640 shares per person. In monetary terms, individual investors invested 59,000 shillings on average. The performance was worse for foreign investors. Out of an allocation of 20% of the sale, foreign bids accounted for 0.03% only. And the Cabinet Secretary now blames Kenyans for the negative review and comments of the KPC IPO.
The interest from foreign investors went down because Kenyans are too much about discrediting their processes, even the ones they don't understand. In Kenya, everybody is a valuer. Everybody is a lawyer. We are all legal experts. We are all accountants. We want to analyze P&L and balance sheet, and we are saying how balance sheet is inaccurate, and you never went beyond class 8. You never did any accounting.
Well, we can argue on whether academic achievement grants a Kenyan more power over the other in holding an opinion. But that would not be necessary. What is certain is that the government had an elaborate machinery to market the KPC IPO, replete with millions of shillings worth of advertising across most platforms you can think of. All that complemented by an excited political class that dominates the two houses of Parliament. They spent much of their time on microphones, hailing what a brilliant sale KPC IPO was, and how it was going to revolutionize the country's infrastructure once the National Infrastructure Fund is in place to receive the proceeds of the privatization. At the end of it all, only 4 billion shilling worth of investment was put in by Kenyans. Why? And what are Kenyans telling the government? Is it that they don't have money? Maybe not. And this is why. Towards the end of 2025, Safaricom Limited issued a green bond worth 15 billion shillings. It attracted a 276% subscription, translating to 41 billion shillings. Almost all the bids at 96% were from retail investors, meaning individuals who put in over 39 billion shillings at a minimum of 50,000 shillings per investor. That was just about 6 weeks before the KPC IPO opened. And now retail investors have put in 4 billion shillings only into KPC, a paltry 10% of what they did to the Safaricom bond. That should tell us something about investor confidence. That Kenyans are willing to bet with their wallets for what is clear, promising and devoid of politics. It's been 18 years since an extremely successful IPO of Safaricom, when the government of Kenya was selling off 10 billion shares, yielding a 532% of a subscription. Now, Kenya is a much expanded economy. More people have money and are more aware of how to invest their money. They are more educated anyway. And so when Kenyans choose not to invest into what is government's, it cannot be because they didn't study beyond the first 8 years of 844. It must be a deeper conversation that any discerning government should pick. It is about people's money, their wealth, and they will put it where they believe there is intention to grow an economy, not careers of proponents. That's my sense tonight.
This week we were reminded in the most painful way just how fragile life truly is. 6 lives lost in a tragic helicopter crash. 6 families forever changed. Among those who passed away was a member of parliament, a man described by many as someone who fought for his people, someone who will be deeply missed by his family, his friends, and his constituents. He was a politician, an elected leader from the ruling party. But in death, titles fade. What remains is the human being, a father, a colleague, a friend, a son, a husband. What shocked me, however, was what happened after the tragedy. Barely 24 hours later, our political leaders were back at it. On church podiums, standing on top of vehicles, addressing crowds, talking politics, making promises. If elected in 2027, I'll do this and that, as if nothing had happened. And I couldn't help but think, death is so final, so very final. In Islam, we are reminded, Kullu nafsun da'iqatul maut, meaning every soul shall taste death. It is the one certainty we all share. The only mystery is when. So what would have gone so terribly wrong if just for a moment our leaders had paused? Paused to remember, to mourn, to pray, or to simply be present for grieving families and a grieving nation. Because sometimes politicians easily fall into the trap of appearing heartless or pretentious. During the funeral, you might not even recognize them as the same people who are politicking so soon after such a tragedy. Suddenly the tone changes, the speeches become solemn, and mourning itself becomes a spectacle. What would have been lost if church services had remained about prayer and not politics? If rallies had been postponed, political meetings cancelled for the moment? If leaders had chosen compassion, chosen Utu? Because moments like these reveal something deeper. They show us whether leadership is about service or simply about self. A colleague has died unexpectedly. Someone you knew, someone you met, someone you worked with. The least you can do is respect them, even in death. Right now, families are mourning. A father grieving a son who had begun carrying family responsibility. A wife mourning her spouse. Children and siblings preparing to bury someone they loved. The least we can expect from those who lead us is a pause. A simple human pause out of respect, compassion, and basic human decency. And perhaps that is the reminder this week, the reminder that this week leaves us with, that beyond titles, politics, and the noise, what matters most is how we treat each other in moments of loss. To be human, to show compassion, to have utu. That is my memo.
Sasa tumechoka na Ruto. Yaani tumechoka. Motherfucker. Kama ni Ruto tutaki president wake bana. Hakuna kazi. Yaani tunakula msoto. Tunakula msoto. Sasa kwa nini tuwe na rais kama wewe bana? Mimi nimesema kama hizi salamu zikufikie bwana rais, tumechoka na wewe.